Hello everyone and welcome to the American Civil War Gaming Club's YouTube channel. Today we are going to do the meeting engagement at Resaca, part number 4. This is a double-blind multiplayer game taking place on May 8th and 9th, 1864 with 106 turns. We are utilizing WDS's Campaign Atlanta game for this scenario. And just a reminder, if you are enjoying this series of videos, come check us out at the American Civil War Gaming Club. Maybe you can get involved in one of these in the future, or maybe you can find a group of friends that you can form a team with and build your own multiplayer team. There are tons of members in our club, and we are always doing a lot of gaming. Come check us out. First off, we're going to do a quick recap of the previous turns in this game. And that catches us up to where we are now. So what are we going to look for in this video here as we get into the next half dozen or so turns? Well, McPherson and Claiborne, are they going to come to blows up in the north? So far, there's only been some light skirmishing between them. But the two forces are getting closer together, and it seems like there's a possibility they could begin a large battle up north of Dalton. Meanwhile, will a major battle instead break out west of Dug Gap? The forces of Hood and Thomas, they are really beginning to clash more and more, but up to this point, the casualties have been limited. Are they going to get into a big scrape over on that side of the map, and will a large battle break out west of Dug Gap? Meanwhile, to the south, where will Stuart's corps end up marching to, and how aggressive will he be? Stuart has already divided his corps, with one division seemingly going to the west and the other to the east. Is that going to remain the case, or will he change his mind? Alright, well let's go from turn number 13 to turn number 14 in this game. You can see all the forces on the map there moving a little bit. It is 9 a.m. in the game now. What I want to take a look at here are these two brigades on the map. Now, the 1st Brigade is part of Granbury's division, and they have reversed course. They were moving to reinforce Stevenson, but instead have now began to march back towards their original starting point. And the other brigade is doing the same exact thing, this brigade being from Walker's division over on the Confederate right flank. So that means that Claiborne has turned around both of the brigades that he sent to Hood just an hour or so earlier. You kind of have to wonder why he's turning his forces around. Well, I think it's because Dug Gap is no longer being attacked, and Hood now has the opportunity to fall back safely to the east, which I think was originally the idea, was to give him some space and some support to begin falling back. But Hood is not falling back to the east, he is holding in Dug Gap for right now. Meanwhile, Stuart could stop where he is and entrench and build a line for the Confederates to fall back upon, but he's not doing that either. All of this means that it's very likely the Confederates are determined to fight it out in the north and to contest every inch of ground rather than to fall back to Resaca. They want to maintain the initiative in this battle, even if it's defensively, as long as possible, and they want to try to keep the two Federal wings divided on either side of Rocky Face Ridge. Part of me wonders, is this really what Johnston wants? A few hours ago in his meeting with Claiborne, they had a lot of discussion about whether it was smart or not to try to defend this far north on the battlefield so near the Federal entry points on this map. So is this really what Johnston wants? Well, it must be, because he has yet to instruct his generals otherwise. So it appears the aggressive defense will continue for now. But I really feel like Johnston is taking an awful big gamble here with his battle plan. Moving to turn 15 in this game. And I want to take a look at this part of the battlefield, so I'm going to blow up that area there. And you can see we have McPherson's force going up against Cleburne's corps, and McPherson has quite a large manpower advantage over Cleburne. And because of that, McPherson was able to dispatch Rice's brigade over here around the Confederate right flank and use them to sneak up and attack this 4-gun Confederate battery here, and they were able to destroy those guns. That means that the road to Dalton is wide open. Now, why the Confederates left those guns in such a vulnerable area, I'm really not too sure. I think they just simply didn't notice Rice's brigade moving around their right flank, and really, you should never have guns unattended anyway. That was a real mental mistake there by Cleburne. And can Cleburne hold this line? He's got his troops scattered all over the place, and he doesn't have a lot of strength. It's going to be interesting to see how Cleburne tries to extricate himself from this situation. Moving back to the overhead map, you can see that Howard's corps is approaching the main battlefield. He has one division up here in the north, moving towards McPherson's left and against Cleburne's right flank. He also has another division moving south to reinforce Thomas. This is very important as the Confederates are also getting reinforcements over on this western part of the battlefield, and Thomas is going to need this additional manpower. I was wondering just a minute ago what General Johnston thought about the actions of General Cleburne and everything going on with his corps commanders. Well, we don't have to wait and wonder any longer. Johnston decided to call the second of his 5 command meetings, this one between himself and General Cleburne. Johnston began the discussion by telling Cleburne that he had launched an excellent spoiling attack to hold back the Yankees moving south. The loss of the battery was regrettable, but it happens. I think you can now slide to the east off of Rocky Face Ridge, then fall back south to come in on Hood's right flank, then fight and fall back together if pressed. Cleburne responded, "I agree with your analysis and plan. I will shift forces to block the enemy from moving south rapidly, and have already recalled the brigades I sent to Hood earlier. With future reinforcements from the south, we should be able to put up a strong front." Now let me give you my quick commentary on the Confederate plan. Just really quickly to recap, let's clear the Confederates off the board there to simplify this. We have Cleburne's corps up in the north with 2 divisions, Hood's 2 divisions, one in Dug Gap and one south of it, and then further south we have Stuart's 2 divisions. The idea now is that Cleburne's corps will begin to fall back to the south, covering the left flank of Hood's corps. And still, Johnston does not want the enemy to use Snake Creek Gap at all. He's trying to block them if at all possible. And that's why he is going to definitely send at least 1 division from Stuart's corps into Snake Creek Gap to reinforce Hood's left flank. Now with Stuart's other division, Johnston is too far away to directly control what they do. So will Stuart choose to send them to the west? Will he go straight up the middle and try to reinforce the Confederate center? Or will he move to the right and reinforce Cleburne's right flank? It's going to be very interesting to see what Stuart decides in this situation. And also, don't forget, there is another Confederate corps on the way to this battlefield. That is Hardee's corps, which will enter the battlefield from the south in just about an hour or so. Overall, this is a very interesting plan, to say the least. Can Hood fight straddling Rocky Face Ridge? If Hood is supposed to fall back as Cleburne falls back, he's going to have a really hard time doing that because there's no east-west roads once you get south of Dalton. The battlefield becomes a very complicated place for the Confederates the farther south they move towards Resaca because there just aren't very many roads for them to utilize. And can Cleburne hold back the Federals across his whole front? Again, without an east-west road to use, Cleburne's going to have to be extremely careful with how he utilizes his forces. And for the Confederates, there are just a lot of moving parts right now. And the interior lines, as I said, are really poor south of Dalton. The Confederates definitely have their work cut out for them. Moving to turn number 16 now in the game. And Cleburne has stopped the advance of McPherson for now. McPherson is up against solid Confederate troops on extremely good defensive ground, and their offensive has temporarily come to a halt. But Cleburne's right flank remains dangerously weak with all these federal forces moving towards it. And in the south, where will French's division march to? He has turned to the east towards Resaca, but is he going to continue in that direction, or is he going to backtrack and perhaps go to the west? Moving to turn 17, 10 a.m. in the game. And I'm going to break this turn down into two parts. The Federal move is first. Now, before I get into what the Federals did, I have to mention that the Federals had another command meeting, this one between Sherman and Thomas. And just to quickly recap, they decided it was time to counterattack, that Thomas needed to be a bit more aggressive on the southern flank. So Thomas would attack south into Snake Creek Gap, while Wood's division took over watching Doug Gap and Stevenson's division within that gap. So for the Federals, in this area here, they launched a counterattack. And let's zoom in on that part of the map. Here, Baird's and Johnson's divisions number 15,029 men. They're moving up against Hyman's division with 6,800 or so. Now that's kind of misleading because part of Hyman's division is way over on the right-hand side of this line. And the reason that they're over there is actually pretty interesting. It is because of this unit here, the 35th Ohio, about 300 men. Now this unit was launched by Thomas about an hour or two ago for no other reason than to distract and annoy the Confederates, and they've done one hell of a job. These 300 Federals have managed to occupy almost 2,200 Confederates for about 2 hours of game time. Now because Hyman has sent so many Confederates over here to try to track down, surround, and capture these Federals, he doesn't really have 6,800 men to go up against Baird and Johnson's divisions. Instead, he's really got about 5,500 men in order to confront them. And that's left him pretty vulnerable. The Federals launched an excellent counterattack on the Confederate left. They were able to get around this stack of Confederate units, and they have now been able to isolate these forces right here. These three regiments are going to be in a world of trouble come the next turn. And this really puts Hyman into a tough spot in this game, especially because the closest units to these Confederates which are now surrounded are these right here, and both units are low on ammo. That's really going to hurt them as they try to counterattack and get their fellow Confederates out of this pickle that they're in. But I'm sure Hyman will come back swinging. He's a very aggressive commander. Now let's talk about the Confederate response to the Federal moves. You're going to see the units on the map here shift slightly on the Confederate side. And let's once more zoom in into this area here. The Confederates were able to counterattack, and they did drive back a Union regiment in order to, I don't want to necessarily say save those isolated men, but to relieve the pressure on them. These forces here are still isolated, and they will more than likely be driven back during the next Federal turn, but at least they will not be captured. Meanwhile, to the south, Stuart still seems unsure which way to send his division. First he was moving east, now he's thinking about moving west. He's going to have to make up his mind very soon. Turn 18, 10:20 a.m. And the Federals moved aggressively again, and they drove back the isolated Confederate units on their flank, and they've managed to halt the entire rebel advance, for now, with Hyman's division. The move against Hyman also startled Stuart enough to convince him to send all of his corps into Snake Creek Gap. So instead of Stuart vacillating between east and west, I think now he has convinced himself to move to the west to reinforce the Confederate left flank. And the Confederates are sending a ton of men to hold Snake Creek Gap, and possibly counterattack Thomas if he moves too far south. Whether or not that's a good idea is debatable. We're going to see the results of it, though, over the next few hours. Turn number 19 in the game now, 10:40 a.m. And because I'm a nice guy and the game administrator, I decided to allow each side in this game to have one free full meeting between all their commanders. I think both sides just need to mentally reset and figure out what they want to do here. So we're going to quickly look at the Federal Command meeting here first. And I'm not going to share everything they talked about, I'm just going to give you the cliff notes. McPherson and Howard would concentrate on driving the enemy right flank and forcing the rest of the rebel army to retreat back towards Resaca. Wood's division of Howard's Corps will attack the flank of Dug Gap and between the enemy lines on Rocky Face Ridge. Basically, Hood's going to aim for the gap between Cleburne and Hood. If he hits that gap, both of those forces are going to be forced to fall back. And it was also decided that Thomas would move cautiously as the rebel reinforcements have been seen moving up through Snake Creek Gap. Thomas is prepared to call off the fight with Hyman and to fall back north if necessary, or back through Dug Gap if it is abandoned by the Confederates. Overall, I like their decisions. With Howard now in position around Dalton, the Federals can finally be more aggressive on the weakest part of the rebel line. The best place for the Federals to attack is definitely the Confederate right. Thomas's orders are vague by design. He's been given the ability to fall back, attack, or hold as he sees fit. Thomas just needs to remain mobile, and whatever happens, he can't get into a fight that he can't win against the Confederates over on this isolated part of the battlefield. Now for the Confederates, they had their free command meeting, and quickly giving you the cliff notes of their meeting, it was decided that Cleburne would fall back southward and stay between the Yankees and Resaca. Meanwhile, Stevenson's division would fall back in Dug Gap as best they could to protect the rear and flank of Cleburne's division. Stewart's Corps with Hyman's division, they are to stop any Federal push in Snake Creek Gap and also to counterattack Thomas if he becomes too aggressive, moving south through Snake Creek Gap. The Confederates have been playing a very aggressive form of defense so far in this game, but they've just not been able to capitalize on any Federal mistakes like they had hoped. The Federals have played a very clean game so far. The Confederates are also mistaken in their belief that Thomas's force actually represents two full Union corps, rather than just Thomas's corps reinforced by a division of Howard. The Confederates are overcommitting their forces on the western side of the battlefield. The Federals have just 27,510 men with Thomas and Wood, and the Confederates actually match them between Stuart and Hood. The Federals cannot break through against even odds when the enemy has such superior defensive ground. So I would say the Confederates have committed too many men to their left flank and left their right flank too weak to stop the Federals under Howard and McPherson. But Johnston is hoping that Cleburne can hold back the Federals long enough and buy enough time for Hardee's corps to arrive from the south to stabilize his lines around Resaca. If they can do that and they can hold long enough for Hardee to arrive, it could really change the complexion of this battle. Now the movements that were made during turn number 19. Thomas has continued his attack against Hyman's scattered division and has continued to drive them back from a number of hexes. But with Stuart's divisions nearby, Hyman knows that help is on the way, and he is beginning to fall back towards those reinforcements. Overall, both sides are beginning to adjust their forces in major ways after their command meetings this turn. Moving forward in the game now, there's a number of things that we need to keep an eye on. Will Thomas and Stuart clash in the West? Is there going to be a big battle over there? We've been waiting for that and looking for that since this game began, but it hasn't happened yet. But it still could. Can Cleburne successfully disengage from the much larger Union force bearing down on him? Can he continue to stay between the Federals and Resaca? And also, how much longer can Stevenson possibly hold Dug Gap? This road here is the key to the northern part of this battlefield, and the Confederates have controlled it since the battle began. As long as they control this road, they will continue to be in control of the northern part of the battlefield. But once this road is taken by the Federals, everything changes. How much longer can Stevenson hold this road? All right, everybody, thank you for watching. I appreciate it as always. If you want to come check us out, you can do so at acwgc.net. We would love to have you as a visitor, and we'd love even more if you were a member. So give us a look, check us out. Membership is free, and there are hundreds of other gamers who love this Civil War series from WDS just as much as you do. Come join us. Until next time, everybody, just remember, keep gaming.